Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Stetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 184. The doldrums of the summer are here. There is not a whole heck of a lot to talk about, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do a podcast. That's what we do here. We've got Caroline alongside. She is at CG Stefco. Kaz, what's going on with you?
Not too much. I've been watching a little bit of the TST tournament, which has been interesting. I'm, totally in USL mode right now. So yeah, just enjoying, I guess, the American soccer.
Yeah, for our newer listeners, Caroline just eats, breathes, and sleeps football like year round. It's honestly it's an admirable thing. I'm more I dip into baseball. I've been watching some of the NBA finals. I watched the Stanley Cup final last night. I'm a little all over the place, but Caroline is all football all the time, which I really do. Like I said, it's admirable. What you're able, the amount of soccer that you're able to consume on a daily and yearly basis.
Yeah, some may call it a sickness, but
some may call it that. I didn't call it that. I would never. Scott is also with us at Scott G. Burr. Scott, are you watching as much soccer as Caroline is this week?
I am not. I walked 36 holes yesterday, so as you know well, Andrew, that's like 10 hours of golf mixed with commute in between the two rounds, and I hung out with the buddy that I played with in the morning. So it was a long day for me yesterday. I did not even watch the U.S. men's national team, which I plan on watching back, and everybody whose opinion I value, you both included, have told me not to do that, right? But the one good thing that can come away from that match is that I am now Poch in for the USA, and you'll no longer have to deal with me being Poch in for Spurs. But yeah, not a great soccer weekend for them, but most importantly, not for me, as I did not watch any.
Poch couldn't even win the charity event today at Stamford Bridge, and you still want him in for Team USA. I don't quite get that.
He's got to be. I've got to have him, in or want him to be in at one of my teams. It always has to be there somewhere. So maybe it ends up being Houston Dynamo, right? I'm really giving some thought to starting to consume some Kansas City current soccer. That might be where I direct my USL NWSL attention, and maybe they can be Poch in, but it's got to be somewhere.
I'll also just tell you, don't waste your time and watch the USA Colombia match from Saturday. It is. Don't do it. I watched a good bit of it for some damn reason. I don't know why I did. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see what it says under Caroline's name on the screen. Berhalter out. I've been that since before Berhalter was in, so it's ugly on that side of things right now. And for those who thought the Copa America this summer would be any kind of delightful for the U.S., you keep thinking those kinds of delusions. Just like I'm not sure where that thought comes from, but it's going to be ugly.
Well, I was going to say, I know at least some of us did our predictions for Copa America on FOTMob, and I'm already rethinking mine. So not a good way to start the tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's a friendly, and you can always see a massive difference between the lead up to a tournament and what the tournament produces. So everything's still to play for, but U.S. doesn't look good. Mexico certainly doesn't look good. Brazil went to the final minutes with Mexico again, who does not look very good. I'm just going to keep talking about Mexico. Doesn't look very good. Sorry to the Mexican fans out there, but they're my arsenal of international football. But my point behind all of that is nobody really looks good outside of Argentina. So it's either going to be something that surprises everybody, or Argentina is going to absolutely wipe the floor with the rest of the field, and that very well may happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, look, Mexico may not look very good. All I know is the USA is also no bueno. So it's not a pretty thing right now. There is a lot of summer football to come, obviously, in the next few weeks between the Copa, the Euros, I know there's a Olympic soccer to come. We'll be here talking about it all through the summer, but let's talk a little bit about Spurs, guys, because I'm declaring this week clear out season. Spurs did make a few announcements this week about departing players that will not be back, and some we knew about, some come, I guess, as a slight surprise. I don't want to belabor that point. It really wasn't that big of a surprise, but starting off on the men's side, a couple of announcements, just that obviously Ivan Perisic and Eric Dyer, as their contracts have ended, they are departing the club. No big surprises there. The two names that did come up, though, that again, not big surprises, but were just noteworthy and newsworthy this week, were Jeffa Tanganga and Ryan Sessegnon. Both players' contracts did expire. I guess the word was that both had an option to extend for a year that the club did not take up. Ryan Sessegnon obviously was plagued throughout his Spurs tenure with the injury bug, and as I always say, never had my favorite ability, which is availability. And Jeffa Tanganga, had a decently successful loan spell this season, but he's going to be moving on as well. A homegrown product. Caroline, is there any shocking news from this list to you, or is this just kind of the start of what we expect to be an even bigger clear out on the men's side this year?
Definitely just the start. Yeah. I mean, I know we've already heard pretty firm rumors that Tanguy Ndombele's contract is going to be just torn up essentially. But I think these names that have already been announced, not any surprises here. It's unfortunate, I think, especially for a player like Jaffet, who is, very invested in the club on a personal level, for him to not be able to seize that chance. And I think the one that also makes me sad is Perisic, which I know I go on about this all the time, but I still feel like we didn't get to see the best of him, when he was actually getting play time. So no thank you to Conte for that. And I wish him luck, especially in the Euros.
Yeah. With Perisic, for me, unlike you, it was very much just like he came in the door and now he's going out the door. And I don't really have like a whole lot beyond that. I do agree with you that he was underutilized during his time at Spurs for sure. But Tanganga is tough to see go. I think I've said it a million times on this show. It's time for Spurs to stop being so attached to our players, right? And focus more on the organization and what the organization needs to compete. But I'll eat my own words and just say that I'm really going to miss Tanganga, and I hate that it's ending. I still think he has a high ceiling, and I think he'll do something good in football for sure. But it's clear that he's not in the plans, and as I just said, we've got to operate under the premise that if you're not part of the plans, then we need to get you out the door as quickly as possible. And this is an example of that. So all the best to Jaffet, one of my favorites, but it's time to part.
I think the thing that stands out about both Tanganga and Sessegnon, more so than the other two or three few names that we're discussing here, is just how young they still both are. I mean, Ryan Sessegnon is still 24, Jeffa Tanganga 25, and already, kind of moving on. And there's been a lot made this week with these announcements of these players departing, too, of that 2019 summer window, which was filled with so much promise after Spurs hadn't spent any money going and getting the likes of Ndombele. That was also the window where they went and got Steven Bergwijn, who's obviously already moved on. It was also the window in which they got Giovanni Lo Celso, who may or may not, but probably will move on this summer as well. Jack Clark was another name brought in that summer. So there was a lot of promise in that 2019 window. And we're looking back exactly 5 years ago now. And all of these names none of them really panned out in the way you wanted them to, obviously, even though after that window, and Ndombele is included in this group, there was so much promise and there was so much hope that this could be a really transformational window for Spurs, and it just simply turns out that it wasn't. And yeah. I bring that up. I bring that up only in the sense that we do this all the time as quote unquote fanalists, if you will, is we grade windows and their immediacy, and it's just a reminder that you obviously can't do that. You have to wait. It's like a draft. It's like the NBA or NFL draft or anything like that. You have to analyze these things a few years down the road and see how they worked out. And it's nice to have a thought and have an opinion on how you think Spurs did, but no one would have told you that the 2019 summer window for Spurs was going to be a D- probably at best, and that's probably what it would be if you gave it a letter grade.
It's an F. I'll say quick, or maybe not quick. I'll try to be quick, but it's a really poor window. One of the worst windows that I can think of since even before I was a fan, right? Throughout my base of research and knowledge of Spurs, right, it's probably the worst window that club's ever had. But there's a reason for that. We came off 2 windows without bringing anybody in. The squad was super stale, maybe 3 windows. But the squad was really stale, and Spurs, the only thing that anyone across Europe talked about was Spurs didn't buy anyone for 2 or 3 windows, right? So there was all this hype and pressure. And so we went and spent a ton of money. And I think we not only wanted to show the world, but ourselves that we were ready to invest in the organization and take it to the next level. And then we sacked the manager 3 months later, So it's a really poor decision by Levy and the club. I'm not even saying the sacking itself, but the way in which that whole thing panned out, I think Levy would have learned a lot from that decision. It's going to be a tough window for him, seeing those 3 players all leave the club, knowing that there was 0 return on investment. And I hate saying that because these are human beings, but absolute no argument, 0% return on investment there, right? So it's again a learning lesson, and I think that's a lot of why we have such a robust scouting department now, and we've reformed the way that we're handling our incomings and signing the right players. But we had to learn from experience, which is always the best teacher. And the 2019 window, showed Spurs what was up, unfortunately.
Yeah, there are a few players that you look at from that window specifically that you're like, oh, well, I can see why that didn't work out. But there are also a few, and Ndombele is the headliner in this, and he's not even one that has officially gotten the boot. But as Caroline alluded to, there are a lot of reports out there that contract will be terminated. And I guess Spurs fans will be somewhat pleased with that. Obviously, looking back, it's not a good thing, but that the ruthlessness of a summer clear out that we're talking about is coming. And if you can't move on players either through transfers or, loan to buy deals or those kinds of things, Spurs are, it seems like, going to be willing to just cut bait with certain players and tear up contracts. And Ndombele is obviously a number one with a bullet on that list in terms of clear outs that simply just need to happen for not only for Spurs, but for the players' sake as well. So we'll have to see kind of what other names come about from that. But man, it's just, I have the list here pulled up from the 2019 window, and it is, do you guys remember that was also the Gedson Fernandez experiment as well? The loan deal from Benfica. It was just, there were so many different experiments, I guess, that just did not go the way that Spurs wanted.
Yeah, experiments is a good way to put it. I would also say that so many of those transfers were just very opportunistic and not necessarily filling an actual need in the squad. So it's good to me, to see that the club is finally getting to the point where they're recruiting players who are able to immediately slot into the team. And it's not like sort of these like player projects that we're waiting to see if they come good. And there are some younger players who obviously are going to need to continue to develop, as they are at Spurs. But I do feel like we've done a lot better job in the last couple of windows about not taking such big risks in terms of, kind of like we were talking about, maybe this player has a high ceiling, but, might not ever get there. So, yeah, I think a lot of these needed to happen. And at least we have a few good memories, I feel like, with each of those players. Like, I was just thinking about this yesterday, that goal that Ndombele scored against Sheffield United. That was like one of the most incredible goals I've ever seen a player make. Bergwijn with his, just madness against Leicester. So, we can just thank them for what little they did contribute, and, hope that they're able to get to a better place in their own careers. Because obviously, like, we don't wish anyone ill will, and especially with players like Japhet Tanganga and Ryan Sessegnon. I just want to see them kick on and actually live up to that potential that we think they have.
And just be healthy, like play football, be healthy, play football, do what you love. I mean, Ryan Sessegnon, for those who didn't see it, posted a really sweet message in the wake of his departure from the club. And look, I'll say too, for longtime listeners here at the Depot, everyone knows I don't know that I've been harsh on Ryan Sessegnon in his Spurs career. I've wanted to see it. I've never really believed in it just because of the health part of it. And I didn't come up with that phrase, the best ability is availability, but I say it all the time because he never was able to show it. And I want him to show it. I've always wanted him to show it. And wherever he goes next, the only real spell of regular football he had was on loan at Hoffenheim, and he had a good season in the Bundesliga that year. But he was never able to do it for Spurs for any kind of a long time. So that's the tough part, but that it kind of is what it is. And obviously, like we very much brushed over the Eric Dyer of it all. I did say his name, but like, we kind of already did the Eric Dyer departure like earlier in the year when we kind of knew he was off to Bayern. And obviously Spurs, the weird part is Spurs are going to see Eric Dyer twice in the preseason because they play Bayern twice in the preseason. They'll also, of course, see Harry Kane twice in the preseason. So Eric Dyer's not fully out of our lives as Spurs fans just yet. He just won't be playing for them going forward as well. That's kind of the ironic part.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say quick on Dyer is one of my favorite memories is his debut goal and his debut start for the club against West Ham. Just an awesome memory. And then when I was in Denver, my wife and I, Kat and I, had the chance to go to open training. That was when he was first used as a CDM, and that was like the big thing that was buzzing through the stadium amongst all the fans is, I think Dyer's a CDM. And then that ended up, progressing into a pretty awesome season alongside Dembele and a run at the Premier League title. So I have some awesome memories of Eric Dyer, and I was sad to see him go, but I've said this before, but he fell upwards for sure. I mean, he played in a Champions League semifinal. Regardless of people's opinions of Bayern and all of that, he competed and started in a Champions League semifinal, and Spurs were just putzing between 5th and 6th place in the Premier League. So, kudos to Dyer for being wanted by a club like Bayern too.
As Caroline shakes her head, I'm just gonna leave.
I can't even comment.
Yeah, we're just like, I have nothing to say about Bayern Munich that's positive. So
yeah, let's just leave that one on the table. There were also departures announced on the women's side of things this week, and a slightly longer list of contracts ending. Shalina Zadorsky, Ramona Petzelberger, Ellie Brazil, Rhea Percival, Esmita Ale, Gracie Pierce, and Nikola Karczewska all depart Spurs women following the end of their contracts. I don't think there's any real surprises from this list, Caroline, but what's the headliner here for you from this list of names?
I think the headline is just a lot of gratitude to both Shalina and Rhea, because they were with the club at a time of really just great transition. And I feel like they were just utmost professionals for all of that time and really helped, us kind of get to that next level. So I think just a lot of gratitude towards them and wishing them well. I know Shalina, it sounds like she may stay with West Ham permanently where she was on loan, or she could even come back to North America. We don't know. And Rhea, I think, is also likely to stay with Crystal Palace now that they're coming up to the WSL. So she'll still be in the same league. We'll still get to see her play. So that's great. I think Esmita Ale, to me, I was just thinking about this. She's a bit like the Japhet Tanganga of the women's team, a player who we really had high hopes and they just never seemed to materialize. But it doesn't mean she's a bad player. I'm sure she's going to be, able to find a club where she can play an important role. And the same kind of goes for like Gracie Pierce. She was a player who was just promoted from the academy pretty recently. So we really didn't get to see a ton of her anyway. And Ellie Brazil, it was a bit like the Perisic situation, just a huge injury that really meant that we didn't get to see much of her at all. And Nicola Krajewska, that was kind of the one that was a little bit surprising to me. I thought there could be a chance that she got to at least stay through preseason and, get another look under Robert Villaham. Because she actually had a really successful loan at Bayer Leverkusen. She was, I think, like the third top scorer in the league. So by no means did she have a bad season. It could just be a case of maybe she's not the exact profile of striker that we're looking for. But yeah, and I think with Ramona, we really it was a strange situation, with her kind of disappearing for almost a whole season. And we never actually found out what the situation was. Was it an injury? Was it something personal? We don't know. But she always had a really good attitude. So I appreciated that about her. And she was kind of one of those like utility players who could, play in different positions. So yeah, so just thanks to all of these players. And I hope that they go on to do great things.
I think unlike the men's side where there's been so many hangers on for so many years, it doesn't feel that way on the women's side. It's more just the regular churn of a roster. And Scott, I guess this is just another part of, and we've compared so much, but Robert Villaham entering a second year, just like on the men's side of things with Postecoglou, it's almost as if this is just that next step of get the players out that aren't going to be here long term, and then hopefully the ins match the outs in that there's a deep enough squad to go into a WSL season coming up this year, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the list may be a little bit more robust or exacerbated compared to the men's because you just got promoted and now have stabilized yourself as a part of the top division going forward, and that always just naturally leads to a bunch of turnover, right? And then you couple a new manager into the whole situation, and you're going to see a lot of turnover. So not surprising at all. I don't have a whole lot to add on each player beyond what Caroline said, but with Shalina and Rhea, again, just a ton of gratitude. It's really tough to be a player like the two of them presumably were, knowing, okay, I'm going to be a part of the journey, but not the destination, right? I'm going to help us get there, and then I'm no longer required. And that's got to be really tough emotionally and mentally. But they never, like Caroline said, they never stopped showing up and gave everything they had to get us to where we are. So, someday when we've been in the top division for a decade, you'll look at those types of players and know that it's all on the foundation that they built or whatever. So thanks to them. And then Ellie Brazil, it's disappointing. She was a really exciting signing for me at the time. And probably some of that had to do with the fact that it was right around the time that I was really getting into Spurs women, and there was a lot of hype around her. So it's kind of one of those like first exciting signings for you when you start supporting someone, right? So hate to see that it didn't work out. I mean, she barely played a lick of football, right? So it's just a tough deal. And Caroline, I think you had shared her farewell post, and it was one that kind of choked me up a little bit, right? In the sense that she clearly is just heartbroken that the experiment went sour because of injury, but also seems like somebody who's going to have a good head on her shoulders as she finds her next opportunity, and she'll do well with
it. Yeah. And I think, one of the reasons that we're seeing so many of these, ends of contracts on the women's side is that you still don't see a lot of long-term contracts in the women's game. Like, I think it's slowly starting to change. And especially like the players that we have renewed over the past couple of seasons have all been like multi-year deals. But it's, we're still going to see, I think, a lot more roster turnover than we're used to seeing with the men's team. Although I will say on the men's side, it does seem like out of necessity, there's going to be a lot more changes than usual. But that was kind of like the accumulation of several, transfer windows worth of bad decisions leading to that, and not just, natural conclusions like we're seeing with the women's team.
Yeah, we already talked about that 2019 window, so I don't want to belabor that point. But you're exactly right. It is much more on the natural conclusion side. I think that's a really good way to put it on the women's side of things, with contracts just ending and things coming to a natural conclusion. I think that's, like you said, the best way to put it. On the women's side too, there's a lot of international football. We talked earlier about some of the men's tournaments, but Olympic friendlies coming up, and we've seen a lot of those. We have also seen a lot of European qualifiers happening, and a lot of Spurs women members taking part in some of those. In fact, Martha Thomas had 4 goals in a qualifier match earlier this week for Scotland. Very cool to see. Luana Buller playing for Switzerland. So lots of different names out there. If you're looking for what's going on with these players, not only on the men's side, but on the women's side as well, lots of international fixtures happening. So Spurs are also doing a pretty good job of recapping those on their official website and things, if anybody's interested in checking that kind of stuff out. Speaking of the international side, a little bit of news for the England men's team, as James Maddison is not going to be taking part for England in the Euros this summer. He has been left out of the squad by Gareth Southgate, and for the first time since the 2014 World Cup, there will be no member of Tottenham Hotspur representing England at a major tournament. This is also the first Euros since 1992 that no Spurs player will be represented for England at a European Championship. This did not come as a big surprise to me, and it didn't rise to the level of, I think, the attention that it got. But James Maddison issued a statement basically saying he gets it. He respects it. He wishes he could have done more. I know that there was a little bit of consternation about him starting a match, but already knowing that he wasn't going to be going forward with the club. All of that is very much England national team political drama that I'm not really that interested in deciphering or trying to read. But Scott, what's your take on James Maddison not going forward with the England squad for the European Championship this summer?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. And if it comes down to what was reported, which is that the decision was Eze or Maddison, then I think the right decision was made. And I say that with all love to James Maddison. Phenomenal footballer, and he'll get back to his best, but he said it himself. He's just been bang out of form the second half of the season. And, his words were different than mine, of course, but sounds like he didn't fault the manager either. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a bummer for James. I love him, and I think he's going to be a huge part of our season next season. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is, with Romero being over here in the States and then Sonny presumably being somewhere with South Korea or in South Korea for a period of time, like he tends to be, we'll have somebody whose home is the UK, who's a captain for the club, around Hotspur Away this summer as we start to integrate new faces into the team. We know the incomings are on their way for sure. And I think we talked about it last week, but they're pretty quiet right now. And I think that's a positive thing, right? And I think that's very much, something that's been designed by the team. And when I say team, I mean the group that handles the team of people that handle the incomings, right? So yeah, I'm not surprised, but when those guys come in, we're going to need a guy like James Maddison around Hotspur Away to get them ready for next season. So it's good.
Caroline, anything to add on James Maddison's departure, I guess, from England for this summer?
Yeah, I think a lot of the drama you alluded to came about because there were a lot of rumors about how he found out that he wasn't making the team, and just a lot of speculation that was kind of unnecessary. But I have to say, I wasn't particularly surprised that he didn't make the squad, and I'm a little bit relieved because I really think he needs some time off, just to focus on training with the club and getting fully fit and into good shape for the next season, because we know this wasn't the best James Maddison that we were seeing for the last few months. And I guess it is kind of sad not to see any Spurs players with the England team. One of the ways I got into Tottenham in the first place was that year that there were so many of them in the World Cup. So that's a little bit strange. But at the same time, we've got players, all across the Euros on other national teams. So there's still plenty of Spurs interest in the tournament. And, I'm not English, so I don't have to care about England. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly where I was going to go. It is a little different. Three Americans sitting here talking about not being that heartbroken that this is happening for a variety of reasons. But you guys both kind of touched on the point that I was just going to make, is that, number one, James Maddison was not healthy all of last season, and we would want to see him get back to full health and full strength. And number two, it means more time with the club. And I'm club over any country, much less one that's not my country. So I'm ready for more players to be on this preseason tour, this long drawn out preseason that Spurs have put themselves in line to have, with many stops all over the place and many matches. But it's a good thing for me. Ange is coming in, and Ange just crossed the year threshold of being in charge of this club. He's going to have a lot to do and a lot of players to work in. Hopefully, as Scott alluded to, new signings are going to come in and hopefully push James Maddison to hold on to and keep that number 10 role that he so desires to have in this club. So I think it's a positive thing from a Spurs standpoint that he's not going to have to jet off to the Euros. There will be other players missing this summer, obviously, and we'll track all of those as they kind of come about. But you guys said it. I mean, this is not. It's heartbreaking for him. Obviously, he wants to represent England and he wants to be there. But personally, for me, I'm just not broken up about it at all. It doesn't bother me, and I'm glad for Spurs' sake that he will be around for the entire preseason and going into a really, really important and I think necessary season for him to kind of grab this role by the arms and hold on to it, especially in his role as a vice captain with this club, and taking on more leadership and welcoming new players in and integrating them into how things are being done under Ange Postecoglou. So tough for James. I also thought that the Neil Maupay of it all was a little bit silly. A lot of trolling going on there from that sense. Did you guys? I'm sure you guys caught the photo that he posted of him in front of a dartboard with some darts. Any FUs we want to issue to Neil Maupay?
Honestly, I don't care that he did that. Like, whatever, just not my problem. I'm sure Maddison doesn't care either, but I don't understand why you would do that, I guess. Maupay has never even come close to producing the type of football that James Maddison has produced. Neil Maupay is not going to be on the French squad unless there's something that I don't know. And he is actually on the French squad, but I can't imagine a world where he would be anywhere near it. So, and it just kind of a weird decision for him to make, but whatever, I guess is my thoughts.
My feeling is that this is good. We need to have a villain in the Premier League, and for many years he has been a villain in my eyes. So yeah, this is just in keeping with his character, I think.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm totally down with having a villain as well. I'm the opposite. I didn't see it as Neil Maupay until earlier this year, obviously during the match where he decided to troll, and it obviously the darts were turned around in his face, obviously by the end of that thing, and that was all fun and games and joyous, and I know he he also issued a statement saying pretty much the same thing. Like, this is all just jokes and there's nothing personal about it. He likes to have fun. He's being a troll. He pretty much just admitted to it. So that's fine. We can all have a banter and have a laugh. And I'm not wishing ill upon him or his family, obviously, but let's go kick his ass again next year is what I would say. And like, kind of just let it go from there, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that, he's not the type of guy that would be maybe my friend, so I'm not gonna
Scott and Banter get along really well. Let's be honest.
So I'm not gonna say anything bad about him either. I still just think why, but and we'll have to really hope that Romero doesn't take a red card because of it. But other than that, it's just kind of it is what it is moment for me.
He's matured beyond that, or at least I'd like to hope so. So we'll see. Last thing before we get out of here, guys, the annual general meeting was held amongst the Premier League this past week. There was a big vote on the inclusion of video assistant referee going into next season. Good old VAR. And the one team that brought it up, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Wolves were the lone vote in favor of abolishing VAR. It was a 19-1 vote in favor of keeping VAR for next season, which is obviously not very much of a surprise. But it would have required a 2/3 majority or 14 out of 20 clubs voting to abolish VAR in the Premier League next season. Instead, it was the one team that brought it up that voted in favor of abolishment. Look, I know we all have our massive issues with VAR and the way that it has been implemented and the way that it is executed, but this is the right decision. If you ask me, we don't need to go back to a world where there is no video assistant referee and no replay reviews whatsoever. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion because VAR has done so many things in terms of stopping just the flow of games and the celebrations after goals and all of those kinds of things. But do either of you disagree that this was the right move? Because I feel like this is what it is. We have VAR and it's not going to go away. It just needs to be made better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I still would be fine with it not being a thing anymore. But if it's going to be here, then let's just roll with it and make it better. Sorry, Caroline, I cut you off.
No, I mean, I would just be a massive hypocrite if I said to get rid of it on the men's side, because I'm forever campaigning to get it in place in the WSL, because it drives me crazy the very easy calls that get missed because it is not in place in the women's game. But I agree. It just needs to be reformed, basically. And I suspect that, there must have been some politicking going on behind the scenes before this vote to convince a lot of the clubs that was going to be the case, that, there will be improvements made, because I really thought there would be at least a few more votes, to scrap it. Feel kind of bad for Wolves. That's a little embarrassing for them, that they were the only vote. But yeah, we just have to adapt, and make it better, because I don't think we can go back at this point.
The EFL did release some statistics last month stating that since VAR was brought in 5 years ago, the number of correct decisions made in games has increased from 82% prior to its introduction all the way up to 96% of decisions for this past season. So that is a pretty big jump in correct decisions being made when you look at offside that are missed or those kinds of calls. In the championship last season, obviously VAR not implemented in the championship, there were 85% of decisions correct during the last campaign. So if you can get that number up above, 95%, I think that's what you want. It's just when you have VAR, that 4 or 5% that is missed, like when we look back at the Luis Diaz goal against us this past season, they get so amplified when it's so few calls that are made incorrectly or when VAR is simply implemented in the wrong way. So that really does shine a spotlight on those kinds of things. And that's the really tough part, is that when you have such a minute number of calls that go wrong, you really pay attention to them. But overall, the decision making is getting better with VAR. People just don't really want to. People are going to hear that from me and not really believe it, but it is true when you think about it. We're not seeing a rash number of offside calls being missed because officials can go back and look at it, obviously, or at least have it buzzed down. I just really want it all to be done more efficiently and more effectively. And I don't think they've figured that out quite yet. There's a lot of this. I know, Caroline, I know you're not much of a baseball fan, but Scott is, and Scott knows there's been a lot of talk about balls and strikes in baseball and how that's going to, over the next few years, become more of an automated thing and do away with umpires making these calls. And as long as the technology is implemented right in all of these things, I think we all want the calls to be right. It's just a matter of doing it in the right way with the technology that's available to us. And obviously, the semi-automated offside is going to be implemented next season. So we are going to get even more technology, if you will, in officiating going into next season. So it's just something we're going to have to anticipate and wait for. And I can't wait to hear Todd bitching and moaning on the pod going into next season about all the officiating decisions that go wrong. Cause that, honestly, that's where I get to kick back and just let him go. And that's part of the fun of it. I know listeners really get fired up for that as well.
You know what, though? I have to say, I'm already predicting now that I'm going to be not so thrilled about the semi-automated offsides, because y'all know that I'm very attackers are getting screwed by the current, VAR implementation anyway. So yeah, that one's probably going to be a struggle for me.
Yeah, look, the technology, like I said, it just has to be done right. If it's not being done right, that's where we run into a problem. So you're probably right about that, though. There will probably be an instance where something gets screwed up, or an official makes there's going to be inadvertent whistles and all those kinds of things. And it's supposed to be hard to score goals, but I think they're going to make it a little bit harder, more than likely, going forward. So we will have to see.
Yeah, man, I'm still laughing. Good shout on Todd. If they would have voted to remove VAR, I guarantee he'd be on this podcast. He would have a beer. Yeah, exactly. Champagne, well said. And he would be ready to get down because Todd hates referees. But you always got to have a guy on your pod that hates referees. It's crucial to the listener. It creates great content. So Todd, we love you and we miss you.
No question about it. We'll hear from Todd in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure, on this decision as well. That's all I got, guys. In case there's anything else you needed to get off your chest, like I said, we've somehow talked for 40 minutes about Spurs with nothing to talk about really, other than a few departures on both the men's and women's sides. So credit to both of you for filling the space and filling the gaps this summer. We'll be here once again next week to do much of the same. Be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. You can also leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread word about the show. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and TikTok at Tottenham Depot, or you can reach out to us via email at tottenhamdepot@gmail.com. For Caroline at CG Stefko, for Scott at Scott G. Bird. I have been your host, Andrew. You can follow me at A. Stedka. We will talk to you guys next week here at the Depot. As always, come on, you Spurs.